this week's episode of NotSoSuper podcast. I'm your host, Matt Curley, joined by my co-host,
Brennan Kahn. Hey, what's going on? How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good.
And we're here back with episode 3. So this episode is going to be about punk rock Jesus, as promised in the first NotSoSuper episode, but we took a little detour and we did a holiday comic that was just in time to be late for the holidays. So that was Jingle Bell Gift Wrap, the complete collection of Paul Dini's Jingle Bell comics. Now we're going to get back on track and we're going to deliver on the promise that we made in the first episode, and we're going to talk about punk rock Jesus.
Punk rock Jesus. Here we go. I just finished it up today. Pretty excited to talk about it because I first started it about 2 years ago when he first suggested it, and just kind of put it on a shelf for a long time, but I'm super glad that I finished it and we can talk about it today.
Yeah.
It's Matt's choice, so this was Matt's pick. So you want to talk about a little bit why you picked it?
Sure. So my history with this book is when I was a senior in college, so this is going back to 2012, I made a short film. Well, actually, it's not really a film. It was a short movie. I hate the term film simply because film is a medium, and I didn't film it on film. Like, I didn't create this movie on film. And so, like, to me, it seems like a lie. It's like when people used to, when I started getting into music, people would be like, oh, what you're listening to isn't an album. An album is a record. I'm like, no, a record is vinyl. A record is vinyl. Vinyl is what you put on a turntable. A record, or an album is a collection of songs. That's an album.
Right.
And so that bugged me, and then the whole film thing bugged me, especially because I went to film school, of course. So I was surrounded by pretentious film school kids who would be like, oh, this isn't a movie, this is a film. And I'm like, oh, fuck you,
It is used
assholes.
that way. It is used like a term of semantics of like a quality movie, like something that isn't like like a commercial blockbustery movie, just sort of cranked out. Yeah.
And it creates this hierarchical, like, oh, well, this movie means more than this other movie because this is a film and that's just a movie. And I'm like, listen, the only person who can say his movies are films is Christopher Nolan, and that's because that guy still films on film.
Good point.
Besides that, everybody else mostly films on digital, and so to me, they're all movies. But that's just...
So this movie that you made...
So yeah,
is
right. So
Punk Rock Jesus related, or?
Well, that's just my personal crusade. But getting back to it, in 2012, I was making a short documentary, kind of day in the life of this comic book shop owner named Ron Killian, who owned this comic book store since, like, I think the 70s it was, called The Turning Page in Milwaukee. And it was this awesome store.
Right, I remember that.
And like, it was clearly, it had been there for a very long time. There were stacks of stuff everywhere. Like, there were so many just hidden gems throughout it. It was like organized chaos.
It was one of those comic book stores.
Yeah, like, it was one of those old comic book stores that had been there for 40 years, 50 years almost, and just had everything. It was awesome. Toys, games, comics. It was incredible. And so, I knew I had to film in there, and I got to know the owner a little bit, and then I thought his story was interesting, and so I kind of made it like just a snapshot day in the life with a brief interview and stuff. It's only like a couple minutes long. It's not, as most student movies tend to be. It's only a couple minutes long. But while I was there one day, of course, I was buying comics. At that point, I was still buying comics in print. I was still very anti-digital comic at that point.
Interesting.
Back in 2000.
Because you own literally hundreds, if not thousands, of digital comics at this point in your life.
Right. As stated in the last podcast, I own over 1,000 digital comics. and there's a very specific reason for that. So one thing is that I'm at heart a collector, and
Oh yeah, for sure.
being a collector, it's good and it's bad. One, it's good because you get really excited about certain things, and I don't know, it adds this fun to your life that I feel like non-collectors don't really understand. But
Because I'm definitely not a collector, so could you like explain like how we're different in that way? That I know you get like a certain excitement with like the visceral nature, like owning a tactile thing as well as like owning it digitally and all that.
Well, so like as far as collecting, I mean, owning things digitally as a collector doesn't really mean as much to me because it's not a real tangible thing. My collections of stuff ranges from DVDs to comic books, just to some video games, both classic and contemporary. I have a lot of statues, but I'm slowing down a lot just because I don't have room anymore. Oh, I also have a couple animation cells from the Back to the Future cartoon.
Nice. Yeah, we're very different in that way because I used to like really love my PS1 games that were pretty rare. The graphic novels that I had and the books that I had that were super rare, like art up books, which I still have a pretty large, like very non-minimalist book collection to today. But I've adopted more of like a minimalist viewpoint of like things that I own and carry around with me, just because I tend to move around from state to state a lot recently. So we're different in that way.
Yeah, and I am the exact opposite. I like all my shit. I like having a lot of stuff, and so, and the art book thing. I have a lot of art books as well. My most recent acquired art book that I was very excited for was the 2-book Ralph McQuarrie complete collection from Star Wars. His work,
which
on Star Wars.
Sounds lovely. Yeah, which I mean, I would love to turn through.
The thing is, like, it's like 25 pounds.
Yeah,
like
these
awesome books, and they're these beautiful, huge scans of his original artwork. They're new scans. Good. It's incredible. There's like stuff, and it's crazy to see. To get off on a little bit of a tangent, it's crazy to see what he drew and what he created, and what's still being used in Star Wars today.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Quick spoiler. In Rogue One, there is a shot of Darth Vader's castle.
Right,
and it's on a volcano planet.
Yeah, I read this.
That is a Ralph McQuarrie drawing.
Yes.
Like
all
that
fleshed
idea,
out, yeah. Originally, yeah.
Came from Ralph McQuarrie. And so, before there was Mustafar, and before it had a name, like Ralph McQuarrie had this drawing of Darth Vader's castle on a volcanic planet. And that was used.
It was so beautiful and so good and cinematic, and you could feel it. Oh man! And remembering, not to make this a Star Wars podcast, but remembering Episode 3, and them having that lightsaber battle on Mustafar, and then just revisiting it in Rogue One was so gorgeous. I love that moment. Yeah,
very morbid too. That he would.
Yeah, he's just like masochistic enough to just make that his lair. Yeah, live it out. The pain and in channeling all that into his dark side, his darkness. Yeah, angsty,
angsty Anakin.
We sure as hell wasn't going to put it on like a planet with sand. We know that.
Yeah, dude hates sand. It gets everywhere.
Unreasonable.
Can you imagine when
sand.
You're mostly robot? Like how annoying that's got to get.
That's a really good point. I mean, he did have a robotic hand when he said that line, so that makes sense. That makes sense now.
No,
yeah, he did, right? Oh, it wasn't until the end. Okay, got it.
It was the end he got it.
The end of that movie. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, and then one of the other couple things that Ralph McQuarrie drawings that are in modern day Star Wars stuff is Star Wars Rebels, the character of Zeb, the purple. I forget what his race is, but that was based on an original drawing for Chewbacca. Oh
yeah, the nose, like all of that, and the fur. Yeah. Very similar.
And then from Star Wars Episode 7, Jakku, the outpost, was originally drawn for Tatooine, and I can't remember what town it was, but that drawing was originally created as like a Tatooine outpost or something. and then they used it for. So it's just cool seeing a lot of this stuff like created in the 70s and is being still brought back. Like this guy still has an influence on Star Wars today, and is like the father of the look of Star Wars, which is great.
Yeah, that would be so intense to have that much creative control over all of the Star Wars stuff. So bringing it back to like collecting and the comic book store. So what led you to Punk Rock Jesus?
So I was filming one day and all of a sudden I'm looking through the comics that came out that week, because comics come out on Wednesday, new comics, and I saw this cover for Punk Rock Jesus, and it immediately, like, I was like, I don't know what this is.
The cover is so fantastic. Yeah, stands out.
This looks awesome. I need to have this. Like, I'm a big fan of like punk music. I'm a big fan of kind of like the punk mentality. Like,
yeah,
I would never say I was punk besides
attitude. I would say you were punk.
But like I was never like, I was more of
officially
like
anarchist.
Ramones punk,
right,
where they just had long hair and
you weren't
and
officially
jeans.
anarchist and
I wasn't
anti-government.
I wasn't Sex Pistols punk. I wouldn't say I wasn't anti-government because I'm still pretty anti-government.
Well, at
this point, but
that's reasonable.
Whole different. That's a whole different story. We don't need to get into it. Either way.
Yeah, the cover, Punk Rock Jesus, is fantastic. And even as you flip through it, I mean, which I'm sure you did that day when you first saw it, there's definitely like a punk rock nature to the imagery, the black and white, the grittiness. In some pages, there's this like black Sharpie marker that's just very punk rock. And I mean, even this podcast in some regards is punk rock because we're into like the indie punk rock ethic of do it yourself, the DIY. Creators, which brings us to Sean Murphy, who is both the writer and artist of this, sole creator of this property, Punk Rock Jesus.
Yeah, so this, the title of Punk Rock, let me go back real quick before we start, and I just want to say the reason, because I never finished that story, the reason I buy digital now as opposed to paper. The reason I buy digital is because as a collector, I don't want any of my things to get ruined. And so because of that, I buy digital to avoid all of my things getting ruined. So I can take things places and I can read them on the train. Right. Read them.
So that's interesting because in that way it like feeds your collective nature. It's like, no, I want to preserve these things. I don't want them to get torn, and I don't want the little nicks on the side of the pages. I don't want all of that.
Yeah,
that inevitably happens when you stuff it in a book bag or you bring it out of the train.
So that's why I stopped buying paper comics. So, but anyway, so getting into this was still when I was buying paper comics, and I bought all 6 of these issues, and I loved them, and then I bought them digitally as a trade twice because originally it wasn't on Comixology, it was on like the Nook. Or something. It was on like the Barnes and Noble app, the Nook. So I bought it on the Nook, and then I bought it, I think, on Comixology when I found it there. This book was put out by Vertigo, which is an imprint of DC. It's kind of more of their adult stuff, which has, Vertigo has really grown smaller over the years because the nature of the industry has grown up. And comics have become a lot more serious. Comics have become a lot more adult. The comics code, which was enforced for a very long time, is really not used anymore. So those regulations of what can and cannot be in a comic are kind of gone now from mainstream comics. And so with that, Vertigo isn't needed as much as it was at in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, that paradigm has kind of shifted in a way already.
Yeah. So now kind of what Vertigo does for DC is it puts out like these creator-owned books a lot, and a little bit more crazy titles. Like now the adult titles are even more adult. Like they're more hardcore in their stuff sometimes.
What else does Vertigo put out that's super adult? I don't.
I mean, I haven't it's been, as what happens with a lot of comic book fans, I come in and I go out a lot, and right now I'm in a down period of actually reading comics.
So you're not consuming nearly as many comics right now.
No, at one point I was buying about $50 worth of comics a week. Now I would say I'm buying none.
And we're getting more into like an indie standpoint or review of comics.
With this. So anyways, getting back to Punk Rock Jesus. So I found this in a comic book store while I was filming. I picked it up and I immediately loved it. I loved the energy. I loved the art style. I loved the grittiness of it. I thought it was extremely interesting, and it seemed extremely relevant, especially to me at that time. And even still now, it does.
Really? Interesting. Relevant to you because, like, there are obvious themes of, like, questioning. I mean, this is a pretty heavy book. Like, this, as far as religion and, like, established religion. So,
well, to give a little bit of a background, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 7 years, and then I went to public school after that for like high school and stuff. And so, to me, being raised Catholic, there was a lot of things that I was told that like I didn't necessarily, that at the time I didn't know wasn't true, and then later on found out it was true and felt very betrayed and also lied to a little.
Yeah, like what the hell?
Like
I was told this as a child.
Right, like as a kid, I was told that, like that myth that there's a chemical in a woman's body to stop her from getting pregnant if she's raped. That was taught to me in school.
Whoa, you just blew my mind. I did not know that was a Catholic thing.
I don't know if it's a Catholic thing. It was just that
religion thing.
It was that teacher.
Oh, or that teacher thing. Okay,
right. Like I don't think it was the school. For sure, I don't think it was the school. I think it was just that specific teacher. Like you have that. You have teachers that go rogue sometimes.
Yeah. Off-road.
So I think it was just that teacher. But like she told us this, and I was just like, and I believed it, of course.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm like, a teacher's telling me this.
Yeah.
I believed it for a couple of years, and then I took a biology class.
Was it a nun?
That doesn't make any sense. No, I didn't. It wasn't one of those Catholic schools. It wasn't an old school Catholic school, but like I had to wear uniforms and stuff. But I mean, besides the point, it was one of those things where like we went to church every Tuesday, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we had mass every Tuesday, and then I had to go, to church every Sunday with my family.
That's a lot of church.
So I went to church essentially twice a week for, I would say, I don't know, almost 10 years.
Yeah, we're very similar in that way. That like 2 times a week at least church. And for a fair amount of grade school and in like 2 grades of high school, I was private school as well. Very different. I mean, like it was Baptist, what's considered Baptist Christian. But yeah.
Was it Southern Baptist or just Baptist?
I mean, I would call it Southern Baptist. Yeah, it's the full deal. It's all that. Yeah.
But it wasn't like the fun Baptists you see where like they're singing and dancing. No, it wasn't like that.
There was some. I mean, like there was singing and dancing. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
sure.
Like everybody's clapping and everybody's having
Is
a good time.
Is that like Pentecostal? Like Would you call that Pentecostal? Like the snake handling, dancing,
that's different.
tongues talking.
That's a whole different other thing.
No, there was no dancing. We were like way too conservative for that. The churches that I was at, but yeah, there was the singing going on, the clapping.
It's one of those things where so religion was a very big part of my life for the first part of my life, and I'm very thankful for that, just because it really gave me a look into it and an understanding of it. Like there's a lot of things I understand about Christianity and about Catholicism specifically, that like just being interested in history really helps. You know what I mean? Because totally. Especially Christianity has so much to do with a lot that happened in history. Like when you look at the Crusades, when you look at the Knights Templar, when you look at all of the Crusades, when you look at all of that stuff, and it's just very interesting, and being able to have that perspective, I'm glad. I would say I would still say I have some faith, but not necessarily the strict Catholicism
Yeah, because
version of it.
that's very, from what I know of it, I'm not Catholic. Never been Catholic, never was raised Catholic, or really hardly ever introduced. I was in a Catholic wedding not too long ago. I couldn't take the what is it, the Eucharist?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't take that because I don't know what you call it. I'm not holy enough to experience that.
It's
confirmation? Yeah, confirmation.
Communion.
Communion
it's first communion. Confirmation is what you do when you're 13.
Yeah, I didn't go through that, so I couldn't take
right.
I wasn't officially Catholic. Anyways.
Right, it's a Catholic thing. So essentially, so communion is, and it's something that you do like when you're around the age of 6 or 7. It's when in a Catholic church where you go up to the front of the church and you receive a little piece of, it's like bread without any flour or yeast. It's bread without any yeast in it, so it's just like a little flat cracker, kind of flavorless cracker, and it's supposed to represent the body of Christ.
Yeah,
so,
Baptists have a similar. They have a similar communion, but I think it's like it's dialed down a few notches, right? As far as like how strict it is. So when you're saying that you're not super strict Catholic, but you do like kind of, you still align with a lot of Catholic ideals.
I mean, like morally, sure, but those are just basic morals that you find in every religion. It's one of those things where I have my problems with the Catholic Church. I love this new Pope. New Pope is great. He's way better than Pope Palpatine that we just had. I'm sorry, that's disrespectful. It was Pope Benedict, who was a former Nazi youth.
Yeah, wow, youth. I didn't know that. But a Palpatine double-ganger nonetheless.
Yeah, so new Pope is great. I love new Pope. I think he's doing some amazing things.
Francis, right? Isn't that the guy? The something?
Yeah.
Some number? Yeah. He's a cool guy.
He's doing, to me, he represents everything that Catholicism should be. He's accepting, he's loving, he's saying, like, the right message.
He's like Jesus, right? I mean, like, ideally. Like, that's kind of more the ideal.
And that's the thing is that, like, I don't know, I feel like this idea of Jesus gets, like, twisted and torn, and, like, you have people like the Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh, man. Don't get me started.
Who, like, have, like, the signs that like God hates fags and like and,
oh my
and
God.
like protest
evil,
all these things.
Westboro Baptist Church, like, it's totally aligns with like evil and like hate, right? And like,
I mean, like it's one of those things where like, like
so bad. They're so bad.
You ever see that movie Dogma?
Yeah, of course, man. Kevin Smith.
Yeah, it's a Kevin Smith. It stars it stars Jay and Silent Bob, his character, his iconic characters, and then it's got Chris Rock in it, Alan Rickman.
I love Chris Rock in that, yeah.
And
Alan Rickman.
And like, there's so many good lines in that movie that like that align with my sensibilities. Kevin Smith was, of course, also raised Catholic, so he, there's a lot of the same sensibilities there. And that movie, I think, summarizes a lot of the way I feel about Catholicism and Christianity in general, is that like people have taken a good idea and turned it into something else.
Yeah.
Like I'm like the idea of loving everybody, being kind to everybody, accepting everybody even for their flaws, and just trying to be a good person, like, is the basis of everything. The rest is just kind of, conjunction.
Yeah, yeah.
Not conjunction, but the rest is kind of just superfluous.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
and I think that lines up pretty well with Punk Rock Jesus. Besides the fact that I don't think Kevin Smith is atheist, but his sort of like
he's non-practicing Catholic.
Yeah, he's sort of like in Dogma. I think he's dealing with a lot of that, like maybe some lies he believed he was told, or like some dogma that he believed and was taught as a child or as a youth. And he's sort of like just kind of explaining that through the art of Dogma in that movie.
Right. And so this, Punk Rock Jesus, I think, is also Sean Murphy really delving into a lot of that stuff and a lot of the stuff that he feels and kind of about Christianity. Like, there's definitely a lot in here about Christianity. So I mean, I guess let's dive in. You know, it's a 6-issue miniseries. We're not going to go through it page by page or anything like that. We're going to kind of just talk about the story real quick, and then I guess we'll just discuss it. So, essentially, the story starts with they've found the shroud. I can't remember. This is a real thing. This shroud.
Yeah,
I
allegedly, right? It's a.
Well, the shroud is real.
Confirmed that it is blood, right? Well, explain what it is to begin with, I guess.
So there's the shroud that was said to have been worn by Jesus. I can't remember the name of it. It's in the book, but they were able to get, it says, DNA from the shroud, and it's enough viable DNA where they can clone Jesus. And so they're going to do this, and of course they're calling it J2, the Second Coming.
Reality TV style.
And they make it a reality TV show. Because of course, what are you going to do if you can clone Jesus? You're going to make it a reality TV show. Thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Put some ads around it. Put it on TV.
And so that's what they do. And so they select a young 18-year-old who to be the mother, the new Mother Mary, essentially. The character's name is Gwen Fairling.
By the way, there are spoilers in this. If you're starting out with this episode of Not So Super, we totally spoiler all over the place.
That's true.
It's going to be a
We're
total
talking
review.
about the whole thing. So they get Gwen, and they're going to impregnate her with this DNA, and she's gonna give essentially immaculate conception because it will have not been through sex, which is, I mean, it's crazy to just think about, like, in Christianity there is believed there will be a second coming,
right?
And so this kind of fulfills that as a second coming in a way, and so it's crazy to think about, like, yeah, okay, this could potentially happen if you were able to get a viable strand of DNA. This could happen.
Yeah, and who's to say it isn't the actual second coming? Yeah,
right. You know what I mean? Because if you believe in an all-powerful God who has a plan, who's to say this wouldn't be his plan? You know what I mean? It's all like, it's all very up in the air. It's all very, like, you could argue it either way.
That's very much where you start out here in this story. Is like all these questions are very much up in the air. Like, is it, is this the second coming? In this universe, like, is this the second coming? And there are obvious religious groups speaking out in support and against.
Oh yeah,
this.
Yeah, and they have those religious extremists in this book, and I feel like this is definitely Sean Murphy, like, poking fun at those groups.
Westboro Baptist Church, and those type of cult like extremist groups.
Yeah, which is nuts. And so the other crazy thing too is, and I'm glad they touch upon this, because this is something that I always. It bugs me. This always bugs me. Is this picture of Jesus being white?
Right. Yeah, totally.
Like, because...
Not true.
One, Jesus was born in Israel, right? What is now modern-day Israel.
He was an Israelite.
Israelite.
He was a Jewish boy and man. Like, that was how... The historical figure.
And all I'm saying is that I've been to Israel. It is hot there. It is a desert. That dude was at least tan. I'm just saying, if he wasn't straight up
probably not blonde
dark skin
with blue eyes, just genetically.
That dude was tan, like real tan. I mean, that dude was, before he was crucified, was walking in the desert for 40 days without food. Yeah, that dude had a nice tan when he got crucified. That's all I'm saying. Like I don't think that's sacrilegious to say that Jesus wasn't white. Like, this American idea of what Jesus looked like is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty absurd. But it still persists, which is wild.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing with Santa Claus. Like, Santa Claus, I think the saint that he's based off, Saint Nicholas, is from Turkey. So he most likely at that time.
Yeah, at that point in time, yeah,
he would have been black. Like, just based on who was ruling Turkey.
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So Santa is supposed to be black too. So like I'm just saying, like there's a lot of America kind of whitewashes history, which
Sure.
that's a whole other thing. But so they talk about in here that they genetically modified the DNA to make him blonde hair, blue eyed.
Of course.
And they also enhanced through plastic surgery Gwen to make her look more, I guess, of the ideal of beauty. So they talk about that she got breast implants.
She's definitely drawn that way. Yeah, very suggestive and like curvy, like a very ideal figure.
Yeah,
of a blonde-haired girl.
And they talk about it in the comic that they made her get breast implants, and they made her made her look a certain way, dye her hair, whatever. So they so that's also going on. Then there's also this other character who is, to me, one of the most badass characters in all of comic bookdom. Thomas McHale.
Yeah, this Punisher type figure, littered with cross tattoos on his back, denoting
right.
the deaths that he's inflicted on people.
Yeah, and so there's this character. He's just kind of like this very strong, stoic character, who is the head of security for the J2 project. His backstory, which is also explored in the comic, is that he's from Ireland, and his father was in the IRA, the Irish Republic Army. Now, for those who don't know, so this is another reason I really love this book, is because my family's Irish. So Curley is an Irish last name, and it comes from Ireland. You can look at the regions where that name originated.
And your beard is red.
And well, hey, listen,
Ish.
those red Irish bastards.
You're Eric the Red Beard.
So essentially, I mean, my family, my grandfather's parents, my grandfather's father came from Ireland, straight off the boat. And so and my grandmother's, one of my grandmother's families also came from Ireland.
They ran out of potatoes, so they came over.
Yeah. So I was always raised with you're Irish, especially the area I'm from. I'm from the Illinois, Wisconsin area, and everybody in the Illinois, Wisconsin area is German, Polish, and Irish. And so, and it's a very American thing too to also, because if you're in any other country, you ask them, what are you? They're not going to be like, oh, well, my ancestors are from these lands, these lands. They're going to be like, oh, well, where are we? This is,
Yeah, you're in Ireland, I'm Irish. Yeah.
I'm Irish, yeah. Or we're in Germany, I'm German. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, it's a very American thing to be like, oh, well, I'm Irish. It's like, no, I'm American. We're all American. We were all born in America.
Yeah, I'm such a mutt that I couldn't even comment on all this.
Oh, you dirty, non-purebred. I mean, nobody really is straight from anywhere anymore. Globalization. But so I, a lot of the themes in here, the Irish stuff, I was raised to love immediately, and so I do. And Catholicism.
Oh,
is,
yeah.
I'm Irish Catholic, and and so the story starts in Ireland, and Thomas's father is part of the IRA. So the Irish the IRA is the Irish Republic Army. So what that is, it's so it depends on who you ask. Like much of history, it all depends on who you ask. Some people say Francis Drake was a pirate, some say he was a hero.
Yeah, from the perspective of this book, which is my very limited interaction and knowledge of IRA, is that it is a terrorist organization.
So exactly right. So on a global scale, it's seen as a terrorist organization that fought against the British. Now, I'm not speaking for I'm not saying that this is how all Irish people feel or whatever, but the other perspective of it is that they're fighting for the freedom of Ireland. So at one point, Ireland was completely ruled by the British. And then the British, then the Irish revolted. There was a revolution. And the British left Ireland except for Northern Ireland. There's, I think it's six counties or territories or however Ireland is divided, whatever the term is. I think there's 6 that still belong to the British in Northern Ireland. And so the IRA fought to get them out of that part of Ireland to make it a united island, to make it a united Ireland. So that's what the IRA fought for. Now,
interesting. I didn't know that.
But their tactics, of course, can be seen as terroristic because, like, they would be bombings, there would be shootings, there would be gassings, but at the same time, it's all
apparently deaths.
A lot of deaths.
Yeah.
I mean, just in history, there's a lot of deaths of British people in IRA attacks. Now, so that being said, there has been a ceasefire between the IRA and the British since I think like the 90s. There hasn't been, I mean, to my knowledge.
Interesting.
Now,
yeah.
I'm not saying I'm an expert on the subject. But that's as far as what I know.
It's a very important part of the backstory of this character and inevitably this whole story.
But right, so that's what the IRA is in reality. On a side note, I have been to an IRA rally.
No.
Okay, but it's not like
really?
a real. It wasn't a real IRA. So
is it like a Tea Party rally? Like
no. It was. I mean, it was essentially like a. There's this thing in Milwaukee called Summerfest, which is a giant music festival, right?
Right.
That's in the middle of the summer. Then in August of the summer, there's also the second music festival called Irish Fest, which is an awesome good time.
Probably a little bit of drinking.
Yeah. Well, it is Milwaukee, so there's a lot of drinking at all times.
And an Irish Fest.
And it's Irish Fest, so, lots of green beer. And there's all of these amazing, bands and stages playing, bands playing on all these multiple stages at the same time and stuff. And my grandfather took me to this one. He's like, "Oh, I really love this guy. Let's go listen to this guy talking." And it was like more of a folk, like an Irish folk singer. And he's singing, and then I realize his song is about getting the British out of Ireland. And then I look around and there's like a booth,
fantastic, like
trying to getting people to sign up for the IRA newsletter, like an email. This version of it when I was there, I think was more of an organization that was like, let's protest the. It wasn't the same organization that's represented in this book and that actually existed in Ireland.
Right.
But it was very
guns.
Interesting. Right. There was no. Well, it's Milwaukee, so I'm sure there were guns somewhere. But I think we had to go through metal detector, so I think we were okay. But anyway, so Thomas's father was part of the IRA, and one night his family is being attacked. He hides, and then his father tells him, "Don't open the door, unless you hear my voice." Then when the door starts to open, and then his father also says, "If someone opens the door, just shoot." And then what happens is the door starts to open. Thomas fires. Turns out he killed his father. Which is heartbreaking. Like he's a little kid, and then his uncle is there, and his uncle says, "Oh, it was the British, because your father was an IRA member,
right?
So come with me, and I'll and we'll make your father proud. Like I'll help you become
make
the
your
man.
Dad proud. Yeah, come with me. I'll train you."
Yeah, and I'll make you who the man you're supposed to be. So that's kind of we get Thomas's story throughout this entire 6 issues. So that's just the beginning of it, and that's his past. So his present though is that he's the head of security for what's being called the J2 project, Jesus 2,
the second coming reality TV show.
And so that's kind of the beginning of this story, and then we see Gwen is about to have the baby. She has the baby. It's live broadcasted.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
And then they cut to a tape with a CGI Gwen holding the baby, and everything looks great. And then secretly, a second baby is born.
Right.
And it's a result of the genetic tampering that they did, all the alterations like just somehow, and scientifically, it's kind of like it's kind of like a MacGuffin. Like
well, it's the scientist, right?
The scientist says it,
yeah.
but like
didn't she? Well, I'm kind of going to the end here, but didn't she meddle in it and create a twin?
No, it was a. I don't believe so, unless I'm.
Yeah, she totally did because I just finished it today, and she mentioned that she mentioned that she created this twin sister, which identical twins aren't supposed to be the same sex, but she was able to adjust the sex of it to female. Now, what I don't remember about the beginning, because it's been a minute. Now, you read the beginning more recently, and I read the end more recently. But whether it's on purpose or not.
Yeah, I can't remember. But either way, so there's a second baby that that the head of the organization, what's his name? His name is Slate, right?
Slate, yeah.
Slate. He wants this baby. He wants to get rid of this baby, so he takes this baby, throws it off a cliff, thinking, okay, great.
Oh my God, right.
Because Jesus doesn't have a twin, so you can't have J2 have a twin.
Right. Yeah, and a female twin. Yeah, it's
right. So that happens, and then everybody thinks that okay, the baby Jesus has been born again, and then the story progresses, and Gwen is kind of getting depressed. I mean, she was like I think she's supposed to be like 16 or 18.
Yeah, you can imagine like the social pressure and
yeah,
let alone being pregnant.
Right, and also like the pressure of like giving birth to the second Jesus.
Yeah, in her mind at this point, she believed it to be completely true.
Right,
that this is the DNA of Christ. Yeah, heavy stuff, man.
And so like she starts breaking down. She starts drinking. Slate is like sneaking her alcohol.
Yeah,
and she's
what a crazy
drinking and
villain, man.
And becoming like a bad mom, like a really bad mom. Truth be told, and all the while, the Sarah Epstein is the scientist who has made this possible, who is also Jewish. I do like that they made her Jewish.
Yeah. And she's working in parallel at the same time on like a global warming cure, right? In this right. Algae she's working on in this the J2 complex, which is not only the show. But it's the big complex that's built on an island that Slate built. Is this place that has so much like scientific advancement and technology where she can work in her lab on other things, and I think that's sort of her MO in this whole book is to work on that cure.
And so like that's her motivation. The reason she did J2 was that she needed the money and the funding to help create this algae that would help cure global warming. So that's why she's there, and that's why she's stuck there.
She's stuck hardcore. For
like
a while.
She gets to leave the island every night, unlike Gwen and Baby Jesus, who Baby Jesus' name is Chris. They decided.
Yeah,
to name...
I like that. That was a good touch.
You're right.
Because in my mind, is like if I was writing this, if you call him Jesus, it's going to get really annoying. Like if they're going to keep calling him Jesus throughout the whole thing, naming him Chris, like Christ, Chris, we get it. That's enough of a nickname that it's fun.
Right, and it makes it, I don't know, maybe a little less sacrilegious. I don't know,
a little less on the nose.
Yeah, and so Sarah, a little bit in says that she's pregnant and that she has a daughter who's named Rebecca, and she starts bringing Rebecca to the island with her for work, and then her and Chris become best friends, of course. Because this is the only kid his age that Chris gets to interact with. And all the while, Gwen is just becoming even more of a mess. Is like just losing her shit.
Yeah, totally.
And so this is kind of, it's just, this 6 issues is the story of this character, Jesus. And so later in the story, as Gwen keeps getting worse, she gets removed from the island, and then
And I believe this is all Slate's meddling, right? I mean, he's meddling in her life to kind of manipulate things.
He manipulates her, trying to he has no problem with her being a bad mother because it gets great ratings and people love to hate her. And B, he's also just trying to control everything. Like, Slate is trying to...
He's a control freak, yeah.
He's trying to play God in this whole scenario. And so, it's some of it has to do with the psychological issues that Gwen seems to have. A lot of it has to do with Slate. And it's intense. And so eventually Gwen gets kicked off the island. And Chris is stuck on the island without his mother. And then that's when Gwen tries to kill herself. She tries to jump off the top of a building, and then an angel stops her and, like, throws her up against the world, and he says, like, what kind of a fucking mother are you? Like, it's like this intense moment. And then she wakes up as if it's a dream, but then sees, like, the handprints of the angel on her shoulders.
Yeah, so that's for, like, the reader to figure out. Definitely.
Right. I mean, it seems very much like, I don't know, like a very miracle moment, like these moments that people say they had.
Like nobody's going to believe you, but you have like some evidence on your body and psychological evidence. Yeah.
So then she teams up with these groups that have been protesting the J2 the entire time. And like to try and break in and liberate Chris and get him off the island. And as this is happening, like I remember there's this page where Gwen is running towards Chris and the doors slam on her.
Yeah, oh my God,
like
that
crushing
page.
her middle.
Yes.
And killing her in front
Haunts
of
my
him.
nightmares, that page.
Yeah,
just brutally getting crushed, and it's illustrated in black and white, and it's like we talked about before. It's sort of like messy punk rock, black and white splatters and like in brush strokes. It's very beautiful. One thing I will say about like the art of this is there are several full pages that are completely gorgeous and beautiful, ink and black and white, just brush strokes and messy splatters, which totally fits in with the grungy punk rockness that is this story.
And it's great. So then Chris witnesses his mother's death, which this sends him off the edge. Like now he's now at this point, of course,
it's a call to action, right? I mean, like it's a character development. It's.
I mean, it is. I mean,
it's the moment.
It's the moment that he's like screw all of this. I'm done. So then he goes and he shaves his head, and then that's when he becomes the punk rock Jesus. And he comes out on stage like because he's supposed to be doing like a personal appearance or something with Slate, and
it's live and
it's live, and he comes out with this giant like spiked mohawk, and he's like what's with the applause stopping? Am I not the Jesus you wanted? And then he so he rebels
big time, and it's pointed out through this sort of like holodeck education that he's gone through with the other baby that was born, his only other
his friend Rebecca.
Yeah, his friend Rebecca at this point. So they go through this holodeck education, and you have the scientist who's pointing out all of these very controversial ideas of science, right? He's pointing to like Carl Sagan, Richard Dawkins, the God Delusion. You see these books on his shelf. He's already had this introduction of questioning and skepticism, and then all that builds up to this point where he's standing on stage on J2 Live, and now he's shaved his head and he's like, all right, this is what I am now. Like I'm the antithetical idea of like what you want me to be. It's kind of like it's kind of how you feel when you're 15, right, or however old he is. It's like I want to challenge everything and like screw you, man, like. Screw everybody because I'm going to be who I want to be. I'm not going to be who my parents want me to be. I'm not going to be who society wants me to be. I don't even know if I agree with society. This is who I am.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, I feel like this is a great metaphor for the thing that not only all like 15 and 16-year-olds, like teenagers, go through, but also like I think this is what would happen to a person who their entire life is told that they have to be one thing, that they are one thing, and that that's just what you are.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, what if I don't want to be that?
Yeah,
like,
what if, man? Like, what if that's not me?
You know,
like,
and so I think it's the rebellion that kind of spark that kind of lives somewhat within all of us. Now, obviously, it lives more within others, and or it comes out in different ways.
Right.
But you know, it's great, and I think it also speaks a lot to the kind of the crisis of faith that a lot of people go through, especially when they're in their teens.
Yeah, big
like
time.
a lot of people kind of lose, because when you're a kid, you believe anything you're told. You know, like
Right.
when you're a kid, most kids, you know, like you tell them that God's in heaven. And
Yeah, sure, okay, all right.
And he loves
Yeah.
you, and he looks at you.
You're
He's
good with
watching
it.
you all the time. Like, you believe that stuff. You know, you believe in the Tooth Fairy, you believe in the Easter Bunny, you believe in Santa Claus, you believe in everything.
Sure.
And then, like, you get to an age where you stop believing in everything. You know, and it's like, I mean, it's represented in media in a number of ways. Like, even if you look at movies like The Polar Express, where when you stop believing in
Right,
Santa
yeah,
Claus, you can't
yeah.
hear the bell. When
Yeah.
you look at what is it? There's a movie, and they say the age of not believing. I can't even remember what movie that is, but that's from a movie. I think it's a Disney movie.
The Christmas movie, just like believing in Santa Claus. There's like an age of accountability or something associated with that.
It's just one of those things where, and I feel like I remember when I was a kid going to church, I believed in everything that they were telling us, right?
Oh yeah. Me too. Totally. Like up until a certain age, yeah. You just
And
kind
then I
of
got
soak it
to
in.
a certain age, and then I was like, well, wait a minute. There's a lot of holes in this story.
Yeah. What is it? This part doesn't agree with this other part. So
Yeah, and
like,
it's
are you
also,
lying to? Like, is the whole rest of it a lie? Like, yeah.
Right, and it's like, it's not necessarily like questioning that, like, okay, well, this if one part of this isn't true, it all must be a lie. Like, but it's also just the questioning that I think everybody kind of goes through. Like, very very few people, I believe, and I guess, like, this is just the people I know. These are the people I've talked to. Obviously, there are other people who never have a crisis of faith or never.
Yeah, that must be nice.
Never go through it. But like most people I know, at some point question their religion, because that's just when you start questioning everything around you. And I think it's good to question things. I think when you don't question things is when things start getting dangerous. It's when you start getting governments that aren't held accountable because
you start falling
what
for
they
it.
said.
Yeah.
I think that's when you start getting like religious oligarchies, which are just controlled by religion, which has, I mean, religion has been used throughout history by many different cultures.
Yeah, it's a control mechanism.
Right, by many different cultures. If you look from the Mayans to the Incas, to, I mean, like especially in, I think it's the Mayan religion, they built Chichen Itza, and the only person who was allowed to go to the top of Chichen Itza was the high priest, and the high priest ruled the day, and was like, okay, well, we
like
have to kill
god,
right. We have to kill the strongest warrior because our gods told us to, and it's just, like stuff like that.
Yeah,
like,
the blind faith issues.
So I think it is good to question things and question your world around you, because it helps people think and grow. And so that's what Chris is definitely going through, and so it's just
to
interesting
the extreme,
because, because it's interesting because he's supposed to be Jesus.
Yeah, and I love this novel idea of pairing the punk rock attitude with the second coming.
Right.
It makes you think a lot, and that's what I really love about this whole piece, this whole book, is it makes you think about what if, if somebody was born that was the Messiah now, what in the world would they think, once they realize the weight of that, all of that, and what that means.
Right, and the other thing to also mention too is that in the Bible, Jesus goes from the age of 12 or 13 or something like that to 30.
Yeah,
you know, and it's made fun of time and time again, and it's talked about in Kevin Smith's Dogma. It's talked about in a lot of things that what happens in that middle.
Yeah, what do you do?
And it's one of those things where, one, I'm sure Jesus appreciates those middle parts not being in there, because who wants their teen years in a book for everybody to read?
Let's cut that part out, guys.
Yeah, guys, we don't need to tell them about when I had pimples or
Yeah.
when I went on my first date
First
or
date.
whatever. You know, like, so, like, that's crazy. And so, like you gotta wonder what, like a Jesus must have thought of. You know, and like, and so I'm no theologist, so I don't know at what point Jesus finds out. I know there is a story in there somewhere, I believe, where Jesus finds out he's the Son of God, and what he's gonna have to do.
That's a good point. Like, what age? You know, like,
But,
did
like,
he
how old?
know
And, like,
the whole time when he was a
and do
baby?
you rebel? Well, no, I mean, like,
Yeah.
he doesn't know when he's a kid. Like, because I think they talk about at some point in the Bible, like, he's on the steps of a temple. Because also, you know, pointing this out, one of the reasons I love that Sarah Epstein, the scientist, is Jewish is because Jesus
scientist
was
in this
Jewish.
story.
Yeah, and this story is Jewish. Jesus was Jewish. Like,
Yeah.
Like, straight up,
100%.
he celebrated Hanukkah. He...
Passover,
Pat-
was that not yet?
No,
that
Passover,
had happened, right?
Passover had happened. You know, like, you know what? Truth be told, I don't know if Hanukkah was a thing yet, but Passover for sure was, because that was the
Right.
Israelites leaving Egypt to
Right.
get to Israel.
That had happened.
So that had happened. So, like, so either way, but, you know, whatever it is, the history, the way it happens, in chronologically, Jesus was Jewish, right? That's a fact. So, you know, there's a story of Jesus on the temple, sitting on the temple steps, speaking with, you know, elders and rabbis, and like schooling them essentially.
Yeah,
and-
yeah, he's
and
like
his
12 or 13 or
interpretations.
something. This is when he ran away from Mary and
Right.
and Joseph. This is all, I'm sure, a product of us being like in private school for so long, just knowing all this. But he fled away. Well, he just wandered, I guess, away from his parents,
Right.
and they were frantic and trying to find him. And he's teaching elders in the temple. He's teaching them
Yeah.
about mysteries and truths that they didn't know.
Yeah, you know, so like it's just one of
yeah.
those things where, like, even at a young age, the dude was spiritual. But I believe in that story, he doesn't know that he's the Son of God. Why he has this understanding, or
Yeah,
or
and what's wild to me,
views.
nobody really talks about that too much in like a church setting or like a Christian setting. Like, that's not a commonplace discussion when you bring up this story, or at least it wasn't in my circles. You know, when I was
And
younger.
it's not. Well, and also, like, and I don't know if this is. I'm sure it's not like this. I know people who say that their church or their faiths aren't like this, where you're not supposed to question things.
Oh yeah, we were not
But-
supposed to question.
But
things.
yeah, where I'm from, where I grew up, you weren't supposed to question
Right.
the lesson, because like there's so many whole like
it's
plot holes.
disrespectful, yeah,
Right,
to the
yeah.
teacher.
Right, and I'm like, but there's so many plot holes and there's so many questions and like
Oh yeah,
what,
yeah.
like whatever. So whatever. So you know, for him to go through this is a very natural thing. So what he does is he rebels, he shaves his head, he runs away, and he joins a punk rock
The
band.
Flak Jackets.
The Flak Jackets, which is a band that he had been a fan of. Because the other thing is that Thomas, who is still in the story, of course, protecting Chris,
Right.
was big into punk rock, and then Gwen got big into punk rock, and then after Gwen's death, Chris gets big into punk rock, and he likes the Flak Jackets, and he becomes their singer, and then they go on tour,
Yeah, it's fantastic.
which is awesome, and then you know.
I love his character design at this point too. Like his studded spiked jacket is completely shaved head, aside from his mohawk, and I'm guessing like dyed black because his hair was naturally supposed to be blonde. But
Right, and then I'll let you speak to the last, you know, from there, because you just finished this, so
yeah, totally, yeah,
why don't you take
today,
it over?
And it's a Sunday. Go figure.
This is our religion,
Punk rock.
comics.
So, yeah, I'm just like a small detail that I really love. Basically, picking up on the page you just left off. It's like it's a full page where he's on the stage and he's punk rock Jesus at this point. He's had the apotheosis of his character, and he's developed the WWPRJD. What would punk rock Jesus do? I love that element. There are a lot of those little things that are like drawn in by Sean Murphy throughout this thing. So now he's officially punk rock Jesus. He's joined the Flak Jackets, and he's on a mission now to dismantle this rogue group. What's the what is the acronym for this group, this extremist Christian group?
I don't remember.
Is it NIC? I think it's NIC.
The new something Christians.
Yeah. So you get it. There's this extremist group that is throughout this whole thing. That's just they're threshold guardians. They're of this hero story. They're the opposing force that Chris encounters throughout this whole thing. So he's on a mission at this point to tour with the flak jackets, like Matt said. And he is, self-proclaimed atheist at this point. He's like, you know what? I'm with Carl Sagan and the boys. I believe in science, and I'm here to, it's my job to dismantle J2 and Slate and what he's all about. And I've really got to tear apart, not only the NIC, this extremist group, but like all the religious groups that are warring against each other in the Middle East. In fact, he actually plans a concert. I believe it's in Israel, right? Like Jerusalem, the holy city. He's planning to have this concert to prove that he's here. He's not the second coming, right? Which he inevitably wants to prove through showing that this shroud that we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast isn't real. Like this is a farce. This shroud, this blood from the shroud that apparently Jesus, the 2,000-year-old Jesus, wore after he was died and wrapped in, that there is blood on and apparently found, is this is a fake version of it that Slate is claiming. So he's all about, like, no matter what, no matter the cost, he's putting people's life at risk toward the end of this graphic novel by having a concert in Jerusalem. And he's very much an extremist in and of himself, which is interesting because he's so against all of the religious extremism, and he's representing the force of, I would say, science and logic at the end, and he's representing that extremist force, which I'm not sure that he's aware of. He's yet another extremist force against everybody else, and you get a lot of backstory about the IRA and Tom, and I don't know if you want to speak to any of that. Thomas and his dad eventually finding out that his dad wasn't officially a part of the IRA. Like, what kind of a blow is that to your own existence? That you see a video. Basically, what happened is Thomas is now captured in recalling in a memory that his dad. He's watching a video that the authorities are showing him. Like, listen, this is your dad. And his dad is saying, I'm turning all these people in because I want to save my family. And I never really was, by the way, I was never officially a part of the IRA.
Right. So, I mean, at this point, Thomas's entire life has been told this one thing. You're this one thing. You're this one thing. So just like Chris, like
Chris.
It's a parallel story of you're obviously he's not being told he's Jesus, but still, he's been told that you're one thing, and he was a killing machine,
and he was born to do it. It's stated over and over again that he has this talent, he has this gift, he was born to do it, much like Chris. Very much a parallel character, like a mirror character. And so then he finds out that all of that has been a lie. And so then, he turns on the IRA and he becomes an agent for the British. Yeah, he comes in guns a-blazing on the IRA. People that had essentially raised him.
Yeah, and so and one of the reasons and it's revealed that one of the reasons he wanted to do the J2 thing is because he wanted to make up for his sins. He believed in Jesus. He believed this could be the second coming of Jesus, and he wanted to protect Chris
and
Gwen to make up for everything he had done, and he had failed Gwen.
Yeah, he'd failed Gwen, and he'd seen Gwen as this like Mary figure, even though at the end we're seeing that she really wasn't, and this was all a facsimile, a facade of an actual second coming. This is a very marketed thing, like a commercial fake thing. We're finding out at the end that Chris is not the second coming. and that there were two babies, actually twins, a male and a female, proving that Chris isn't the second coming, and that Gwen wasn't a virginal, Mary character.
And it's not even necessarily proving that he wasn't the second coming,
Right?
But it's saying that, like, there's more to the story in it.
Yeah, that's a little bit left up, I think, to a bit of a loose end, but.
Yeah.
We're closing in on the fact that this was probably fake because of Slate burning down the island and the facility of J2 and where they lived and where the shroud existed and all of the proof. And we see him. I think we see him in a panel with gas cans, right, burning this down, burning this thing to the ground. But speaking to Thomas and his redemption in all this, Thomas almost the hero character in this.
Yes.
Seeing Gwen as a Mary figure, and even I guess I would call it hallucinating, or just seeing an image of both Mary and Gwen, very similar style, almost exactly the same, coming to him and saying, first of all, Mary, you're forgiven. I've forgiven you. You may go to heaven, but you can't kill another soul, or I will send you to hell. At the end, and so he's caught between this tough position of Mary has said, don't kill anybody else, you've been redeemed for all of your sins, but if you kill another person, then I'll make sure you go to hell. And Chris now has put him in this position of Thomas has to grab a gun and defend Chris in the Middle East where this concert is supposed to happen in Jerusalem, and open fire on these people who are holding a pistol to Chris's head, ready to shoot and just take him out. So there's this agonizing decision that Thomas has to make, go to hell or save Chris. Basically what Mary had told him earlier on in visions in his life, don't kill another person, you go to hell. Or Gwen in the same panel saying, save Chris. You promised me that you'd save Chris. Please, if you save Chris, then you have redeemed my death. So he has this super difficult decision to make, which he eventually does, pulls the trigger, and he believes sending him to hell and saving Chris's life.
Yeah. And then trying to think.
And Chris eventually is going to die in this, what I think is like a beautiful one-pager of this helicopter crash. So, you believe that Thomas has saved his life.
Right, like he gets away in the helicopter.
Yeah.
You think it's going to work out, and then the helicopter starts
there's this tragedy.
down.
Yeah, which
and then there's this beautiful one-page illustration of him dead, and then there's a cross, of course, in the background, a giant cross in the background, and then
it's gorgeous.
And then so Chris has now died. He's kind of fulfilled the self-fulfilling prophecy of being a Jesus figure and dying.
Dying at the hand of these Christian extremists back home.
Right. These people who are he's supposed to save, and he's supposed to...
Yeah, which is a total nod to, what some believe that the blame is put on Jewish people for crucifying the second coming initially 2,000 years ago. So essentially his own people...
Well, I'm going to stop you right there because that's actually not true. So
please inform me on this because
the Romans are the ones that crucified Jesus. The Romans were in charge. They crucified Jesus.
There's sort of a misnomer and a blame. Yeah, there's a blame put on the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean and it wasn't just Jesus.
I don't know if that's a Catholic thing or what.
I don't think it's a Catholic.
Is that just like a Western, American thing?
I think it is. I think it's just a misconception that the Jews killed Jesus. It's Mel Gibson's fault.
It's all. We'll blame Mel Gibson. He'll take the fall for this, I'm sure.
But I'm not saying that I'm not saying I'm an expert in it, but I know that it was the Romans that killed Jesus and crucified Jesus, because the Romans, that's what they did. They crucified people. Like, it wasn't like Jesus was the first. Like, Jesus was in a long line of many people who were crucified by the Romans.
Right.
And in fact, it was a Roman soldier who, you know, not to get off on too big of a tangent, because I do want to get to the end of this book, but there's a Roman soldier who stabs the side of Christ. So whenever you see a crucifix and you see the little line of red,
he's got the spear mark in his side.
He's got the spear mark in his side, and that's what really killed him. And it's said that when he was stabbed, water and blood came out onto the spear. Yeah. And that spear was then endowed by mystical powers because it stabbed the side of Christ.
Whoa. I had no idea. I never heard that.
If you've ever heard the term the Spear of Destiny, that is the Spear of Destiny's origin. The
Spear of Destiny. That sounds like a video game. It was, I've never heard that before, but that's awesome. That's cool.
The spear has a very interesting history in life. It's said to be, Constantine the Great was said to have rode into battle with the Spear of Destiny. Badass. And that the Spear of Destiny made him invincible because it had the power of Christ.
That's badass.
And so he rode with it into battle, and then it ended up in a museum in Austria. And I think it was Austria? Yes, Austria. I'm pretty sure. It ended up in a museum in Austria, and then it was there for a long time, right? So then what ends up happening is Hitler...
Oh, of course.
Finds out about the Spear of Destiny, finds where it is, sends a Nazi agent to go there before he invades Austria, and go there in civilian clothes, and then this soldier knows when the Nazis are going to invade. So when the Nazis invade Austria, he changes into his Nazi uniform and guards the Spear of Destiny until Hitler arrives to claim it. To claim his prize.
That's amazing. Wow.
Because one of the true things
I had no idea.
That about Hitler was that he was obsessed with the occult, and he was obsessed with these mystical
gathering
items.
These mystical cultish items.
Yeah.
Obviously Indiana Jones, Ark of the Covenant and things like that.
Yeah, that
he believed this stuff, man. He believed these things had power, these totems
and so
and
he has
items.
He has the Spear of Destiny. It ends up getting recovered by the Americans when they bomb, I think it was Berlin, or Nuremberg, I can't remember. But it was underground with a lot of other stolen artwork.
They find the spear.
Yeah, so the Nazis stole artwork from every country they invaded, and they took it back to their capital, and it was hidden in these.
Have you ever seen Monument Men?
I haven't seen it.
I don't know about the Spear of Destiny, but they do find several relic art things.
And Monument Men might be based off of this story, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't seen Monument Men. But the story goes is that the Allied powers the Americans capture a guy who is running artillery for the Germans, for the Nazis, and then they question him, and he's like, "Listen, I'll tell you whatever you want. I have no love for the Nazis. Listen,
got no love for those guys.
I'm doing what I have to do." And then in the conversation with the interrogator, who isn't torturing him or anything like that, he's just like, "What do you want to know? I don't know anything. I'm just a guy who drives artillery around. But I'll tell you whatever you want."
I drive the truck, man.
He tells him about, hey, there's this giant art cache. Whatever it's called, a giant art collection. Underneath the city, and the Spear of Destiny is in there as well. And is saying, things that's there. He's like, I know where it is because my mother cleans it. She's
that's fantastic. The cleaning lady.
Yeah, she's the cleaning lady. She's the one that goes and she dusts everything and maintains it. And so he describes where it is and how to get it. So they do. So while they're bombing the city, they send a group in to go and get this art to ensure that the art is protected and stays safe, and they do that, right? So then they get all this art and they get the Spear of Destiny back, right? Well, General Patton finds out about the Spear of Destiny, And while all of the other art is returned to where it originally came from, he takes the spear for himself and refuses to give it back to the Austrians.
Oh my God, I'm writing this down. I gotta look this up later.
And so
this is too good.
And so he's refusing to give it back, and then he dies in a car crash.
Oh, eerie.
And then the spear goes back to Austria, where it stays.
It goes back.
Where it still is to this day. Now, in I think it was in the 90s, in the mid to late 90s or early 2000s, they did carbon testing on the spear to see how old it is, right?
Right.
It was made 500 years after Christ's death.
Oh,
so
bummer.
It is not the spear of destiny.
Oh,
but all
man.
these people have. But it is said that it could be the spear that Constantine used, it said that I think
sure it's that old at least.
It is still the spear that Constantine used, or it could be. I can't remember if it is or it could be the spear that Constantine used to go into battle. It is old enough to be that spear, but it is not old enough to be the spear.
What a buzzkill.
That pierced the side of Christ.
Oh, man.
Isn't that crazy, though?
That's insane, yeah, man, I had no idea. That is, and there are all sorts of those relics if you look them up. And
I mean, there's so much fun. There's like so much fun history
you
and
Catholics
archaeology
are fun.
and stuff.
You know it? You and your relics.
Listen, Holy Grail, man. Holy Grail.
Holy Grail.
So anyways, getting back to off of that fun tangent, we're at the end of Punk Rock Jesus, and Chris is dead, and now there's an aftermath. There's like a U.S. hearing.
Yeah.
And Slate essentially gets off easy.
Gets off, man. Gets off scot-free almost.
And I think it ends up with, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it ends up with Sarah getting the island. The island is hers now, and she gets a settlement. Like everybody gets a settlement, gets like some money, and so she's rebuilding the island to help do what she wants it to do. And
we have this very important plot point at the end that, which we've been talking about since the midpoint here. I think that Rebecca is Chris's sister.
Right.
Genetically, biologically, 100%.
Yeah, that so it is revealed by Sarah telling Thomas that on the night of Chris's birth, Rebecca was also born. Mm-hmm. And not only was Rebecca also born, but Slate put enough poison. I want to make sure I get this right. He injected her with enough poison, essentially, to kill 2 adults. A baby,
right?
And then, as if the poison wasn't enough, he then dumped I said before it was a cliff. It wasn't a cliff. It was water. He dumps the body of the baby into the water so that no one can find it. Right. It turns out that Sarah had followed him because she didn't trust him, and then she dove in, grabbed the baby, performed CPR, thinking that there's no way this is gonna work.
Yeah, baby's dead.
He injected her like there's no way like the baby if it hasn't drowned, it's dead from the poison.
Yeah, the injection that he hypodermic needled into the baby's mouth.
And then but there was like a miracle. The baby lived.
Yeah.
And then this is kind of when you get a realization that maybe Chris wasn't the second
maybe
coming.
It's her.
Maybe Rebecca.
It opens up that question for sure.
And so then not only that, but Thomas starts to freak out because he's like, oh my God, he's a monster. How could he have done this? And
And Thomas is like, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you why didn't you bring it? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell the authorities? You could have stopped this madman,
for years, and so. And so the reason she says that she's telling him now is that she doesn't believe in hell. So this is a side note is that Jewish people don't believe in a hell. Hell is a construct of Christianity.
Interesting. That is so interesting. Growing up, I think it's partially the people that it taught me, and just sort of assuming, a lot of assuming too. that Jewish
So-
people believed in some sort of a hell or afterlife, that like a consequence, you know.
They believe in an afterlife, but not in hell. They believe in heaven. I don't actually. So my wife is Jewish. I don't know enough though about their afterlife to like. They believe in heaven, but they don't believe in a hell. So I don't know what happens if you don't go.
Yeah,
to
what
heaven.
if you're Hitler, for example?
Right. I don't know, but you know, like that's
Feel
a
free
lack
to
in
comment.
my knowledge. But yeah, if you know the
in
answer,
the show notes of YouTube or wherever you're listening, if you want to go to YouTube and comment.
But so either way, so she says, I don't believe in hell, and I want Slate to get justice in this life. I don't want to wait for him to get to the next life and burn.
Yeah, she's a
for all
scientist, a
eternity.
pragmatist, a logical person who doesn't believe in those sort of things, in spirituality and those kind of consequences. She wants it now. She thinks he needs it now. That's why she's bringing it up.
And so Thomas goes for him, and it is an awesome like couple pages like sequence where Thomas rides on
brutal.
his motorcycle.
Oh my goodness.
He's a total badass. Drives up beside Slate, rips Slate from his car.
Yeah,
while they're
absurd.
driving.
Yeah,
Drags him on the road on the asphalt.
aside his motorcycle.
Aside the motorcycle, and then drives up to an oncoming 18-wheeler and slams
Splat.
splatting
Yeah.
him like underneath the
Yes.
tires.
Yeah.
Like, and Thomas gets his
Last
revenge.
panel. Splat. The end.
Yeah, it's an awesome moment, and it's like the moment you want to see the entire book from all the things that Slate has done. It's just such a cathartic moment to be like, he got his in the end.
Yeah, that was a brutal ending.
And that's the book.
Yeah,
man.
even though it's black and white, like I know that we at the beginning when we reviewed Apocalyptic Girl, you know, there's a lot of brutal like bloody scenes in that, like spurting blood, like everything. But this is gorier to me, even though it's black and white. From the art style, just the splats and the smears of the brush, you know, this really is like a horrific scene compared to a lot of the style that we see in Apocalyptic Girl, comparing it to the first graphic novel we reviewed in episode 1.
And just talking about this, you know, this art style is absolutely gorgeous. So that's something that we haven't really touched upon. We kind of in length discussed the story, but the art style, it's black and white. I believe that it's inked by Sean Murphy as well.
Yeah, that's what I understand
so,
from the credits called out in the print that I have. See, I read the printed piece.
And
there was a letter,
like,
but as far from that, it says Punk Rock Jesus created by Sean Murphy. So we can assume that he illustrated, inked, everything except lettering, wrote it.
Right, and so you're really getting a set like Sean Murphy's artwork is very. It's very specific. It's a very specific style.
Yeah.
I would say that it's very extreme detail.
Yeah, he holds on to a lot of details. Like I think, just for my own taste, he puts in a little more detail than I need, in a lot of pages. And it only one criticism that I have about that is it seems to like clutter a bit. Which
it's very dense.
It's very image dense and line dense, and some of the pages, a lot of the pages are like black backgrounds as opposed to like a typical white background, which makes this feel very heavy.
And it's a heavy story, and I think that it really helps inform the story, and I think the art.
Otherwise I would be more
this.
critical about it. You know, from a stylistic standpoint of like being so dense. And so, like, scratchy, I would say, like, in the way he uses the pen. But it is a punk rock story, and it's black and white, and that Sharpie feel and that DIY feel. You totally get through the visuals, and I don't think it would work as well if it didn't have that.
It's just one of those stories where, like, you read this, and you're just like, the entire time you read it, you're just like, this feels punk rock.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels
every
like
step
that.
of the way.
And it's... And I think it's amazing. Now, it's interesting because, you know, there is other work that, you know, Sean Murphy has done. Like, you know, just to list a few of the other things that he has done. I mean, he's done issues of Hellblazer, which is John Constantine.
Okay.
You know, he the other thing that I've really read of his is Joe the Barbarian. It was an 8-issue limited series, also done by Vertigo, that was written by Grant Morrison. And now that one is in color. But it's still very much the exact same style.
Yeah,
like
the characters.
Like Joe from Joe the Barbarian looks very similar to Chris from this. But like I would love to actually get you to read that one, and then we could discuss that art versus this art, because that's in color.
Right.
It's not written by him. It's not a punk rock story, but it's that same.
Yeah,
art
I don't know how it would work until I read it. How successful it would be, because this totally works visually, and it's scratchy and punk rock and DIY, and it fits the story so well. Like that's otherwise it wouldn't be my favorite. It wouldn't be my favorite style.
Yeah. So it's definitely great. It's very but as you're right, it's very scratchy. It's very detail oriented. It's very dense. The images are very dense.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't read as smooth as clearly as other things that I think we've reviewed so far in episodes 1 and 2. But all of that, I think, points to a stylistic decision that in the end is successful and it works. If it's not your thing to have like a lot of words and a lot of lines and a lot of details on one page, then maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's something that you can't really get through. But I totally had no problem like turning pages and eating it up.
So I guess let's
rate this thing. I guess
words. Let's rate it. For me, I'm gonna give the art and color. Because it's in
we're going by the 4-color system, the traditional 4 colors of comic books, which I believe is that CMYK. Is that like basically the same thing?
I think so. I'd have to look that up, because like obviously they don't stick to originally comic books were only 4 colors, and you would combine colors to make other colors. Right, exactly.
But besides the point, 4-color rating system.
But our 4-color rating system is how we're going to
rate
all of these things. For art and for color, I'm going to give this 4 each.
Wow. Okay. You really like it.
For story, I'm only going to give it 3.3.
Oh, wow.
And the reason it docks story for me is that because I feel like it gets rushed towards the middle and end.
75% you're giving it on story.
I'm giving it a 7. Now, I love the story. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love the story. But I do want to be critical about certain things, and I don't want to just give everything a 4.
Right,
So the reason that I say that is because even when I was reading these month to month when they came out.
Yeah.
Starting in July of 2012 is when the first issue came out. And I was very excited for each new issue. And even still, when I got to the end, I felt like it was very rushed towards the middle and end. And of course it has to be. It's a 6-issue limited series. But I think there might have been a little room where you could have expanded on certain things, cut out a couple things.
Yeah, you totally could have cut out
give it room to breathe.
A lot of the fat, I think, of the story.
But that being said, I still love this story.
Yeah, it's a complete piece, and it totally works. It's successful. If somebody completes something, it's successful, and it's a holistic story. Like, I'm never gonna criticize you too much. Like that, you did a thing, you did it, and it's great, and it works, and it tells a story, and it's cathartic, and the characters developed. Like, good job.
Right. Like, and of course, as I said when we were reviewing some Jingle Bell stuff, and we talked about, I believe it was called Bluebells. Like, there are definitely some things that I absolutely hate, and that I will give 0 across the board. But I do want to be critical as we're reviewing these things, just because. Yeah, that's what we're doing. That's the point. That's the whole point of this, is that we're looking at this stuff critically. So so for me, it's 4 for the art and coloring, which in this group of comics, it's black and white, but it's the inking, which I think is a deliberate choice.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm going to give that a 4, and then the art I'm giving a 4, but story I'm only going to give a 3. How about you? What are your ratings?
Okay. I'm going to start with art and color as you did, the same. I'm just going to group them together because it is a stylistic decision to go with black and white, and I agree so much with that decision. That's why I'm going to give it, I think, a pretty high rating, just from my own personal taste, which is a 3 out of 4. So I'm giving it a pretty high rating because that decision paid off and like it made so much sense.
So what docks it for you? What docks that last point for you?
I think that like a sequential art style and the density of words and visual information on the page could have been cut a lot. I think that's a style, part of the style choice of being like this punk rock, black and white gritty thing, but a lot of it, even though it wasn't that style, a fair amount of it was hard to read. Some of the pages were a little hard to decide how I should flow down and what I should look at first. And that's what docks it, as well as some of the character design just isn't really my own personal style preference. Like for instance, the faces that were drawn, there's a lot of like scratch marks on a lot of the characters' faces,
especially Slate's.
Yeah, especially Slate's. So it's sort of a disfiguring to the character, which is a total style choice, which worked, which is why I give it a 3 out of 4 for both color and art illustrative style. It works, but it's just not my preference. And for story, I'm gonna give it a 3. I'm with you. There are a lot of things that probably weren't as necessary as others to put in. I think that I give it what I think is like almost 100%, 3 out of 4, is because the nuance of the idea. Like he totally had an idea that was very new and interesting, and he finished it. He completed a whole graphic novel about it, and we traveled with him through this story arc. And at the end, it did some very important things that stories need to do. It made us question about our own lives. And that to me is worth a 3 out of 4. Even though there were some issues, I think, and some story develop, some character development that could be potentially cut out.
Okay, fair enough. So you were saying that you read the afterword. So what did in the afterword?
Yeah, let me flip to it. Well, yeah, let me flip to it.
What was Sean Murphy talking about in the?
So what I'm reading from is the collection of all the issues in the graphic novel, The Print. So after the very last graphic page of Thomas, the end page, the splat page where he throws Slate underneath the 18-wheeler, we have the afterword by Sean Murphy himself, and at the very beginning, it says, "I stopped praying in 2003. I was living with a friend in Colorado who loved to surf." And he goes through this story that he describes that he went to California to surf with a person he lived with in Colorado who was an atheist. So this atheist friend started to describe to him his ideas and his worldviews and sort of things that he leans on that aren't religion. So Sean, He describes while he's writing Punk Rock Jesus, or starting to mull around with this idea in his head while he's living with his friend in Colorado, he starts to question his own faith. And he tells the story of when they go surfing in California, that he gets sucked in by the undertow. And he's very scared, and his first thought and inclination is to start praying. But previously, he, knowing his roommate is atheist, wanted to try it out for a while. So he takes a while off praying and tries out atheism, which is interesting, kind of like a diet. So during this, he's surfing. He gets caught in through the undertow in California surfing with his friend, and says, "Wait, I made this promise." I don't know why he thinks to do this, like while he's potentially drowning, but he thinks, "No, I promised myself I wouldn't pray for a period of time because I'm trying out being an atheist, so don't pray." So he changed his mind from, "I need to stop praying to God while I'm in this situation of crisis, and I need to get myself out of it." So he's tossed under the undertow, and he's twirling around underneath water, and he can't figure out which way the surface is, up, down, sideways, whatever. So he has stopped praying. Now he's thinking, in his words, like more logically, that his surfboard is still tied to his ankle. So he's reaching around trying to find the line because the surfboard has made its way up to the surface. So he's finding his way and fingering the rope and grabbing it and sort of getting a handle on it to pull himself back up. So when he's done this and afterward, he describes that if I'd kept praying, in his own words here, in the afterward, if I kept praying, then I wouldn't have thought to look for the rope to pull myself back up. So he's basically proclaiming that prayer would have been, opposite of what he needs to do in this situation to save himself. And he points it out that logic and that thought pattern to get himself out of the situation through his own willpower was more important than praying in that situation. So that's just, and he puts a bow on it here that, he embraced more the atheism at this point, and he began rewriting Punk Rock Jesus into the story, the complete story that it is today.
That's interesting, and that's also an interesting thing to bring up too. Is that and I would agree with that sometimes religion is used as a crutch to not do anything, because you're waiting for some mystical force to
thoughts and prayers, right? Any crisis happens, you hear it 50 times.
Send your thoughts and prayers.
Yeah,
like that.
Thoughts and prayers.
And to me, I think that's also against. I think that's against some of the main morals and ideas of Christianity in general, because there's this joke that's said, and I think that really illustrates the point well. That's like, a guy's in a boat, right? And the boat is sinking, and he's praying to God. He's like, God, please help me. God, please save me. And a guy comes by and says, "Oh, hey, do you need help?" He's like, "No, I'm a Christian, and God is going to save me. God is going to help me." Guy's like, "All right." Guy leaves. Boat's still sinking. He's praying, "Please, God, please help me, help me." Another guy comes by and says, "Hey, do you need some help? I can help you." And he's like, "No, I'm a Christian, and God will help me. God's going to come and save me." So guy's like, "All right, if you're sure." He leaves.
All right.
Third person comes by and says, "Do you need some help?" And he says the same thing. He's like, "No, I'm a Christian, and God is gonna help me."
Right.
Then the man drowns. So the man goes to is in heaven. He was a good Christian. He goes to heaven, and he goes right up to God and says, "God, why didn't you save me?" And God looks at him and says, "What are you talking about? I sent 3 boats.
I sent three people.
Yeah,
dumbass.
I sent 3 boats to help you." I think that illustrates what, if
you're given the brain to get yourself out of situations.
And if God, God doesn't. When we pray to God, we're not supposed to be asking for stuff. That's another thing that they taught me when I was in
same here
in Catholic school.
Private school.
Is that God's not there to give us stuff. God is there to listen when we need help. I mean,
you got to lean in, brother.
Essentially, God, to me, sounds like a psychiatrist that's way cheaper. That he's there to listen. But God doesn't do anything for us beside in my understanding, God doesn't do anything for us really, besides give us life and give us the world that we live in. And that's how I understand it. Now, I know there are miracles, and I know you can say things are miracles. I certainly think that there's a lot of things that happen in the world that are amazing and magical and mystical and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
And
spiritual.
If you want to call those miracles from God or from whoever you believe in, that's totally fine. But I think at the same time, I think that as intelligent human beings, we are given you're given the faculties you need, right, to do something about it, to get yourself out of a situation. You know what I mean? Waiting for someone to save you is not the world we live in. You need to save yourself.
It's almost like, what'd you expect?
Right.
What'd you expect? Yeah, it's like, yeah. And that's definitely what Sean's pointing at here. Yeah, that he changed. He actually changed in the story, the Jesus clone, Chris, from Christian to atheist.
Right.
After citing these experiences while surfing,
and
his atheist roommate.
And I think that brings up an interesting thing too, is that these stories are written by. I mean, this proves more than anything else that these are written by real people who are writing from their own experiences and writing from their own knowledge, and like.
And that's super important. Yeah, it's write what you know. A lot of people say.
Yeah, and obviously you don't need to know about spaceships or whatever, or about dragons or whatever to write, but like you can write the emotions that you know.
Yeah, if somebody broke your heart, make that into the spaceship story. Like make your heart break into the spaceship story.
You can use that stuff, like use what you got to make your stories better. And I think this is a perfect example of like a story that changes because of his experiences changing while he's writing it. Another example of that is Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. That story gets, there's The Dark Knight Returns, and then The Dark Knight Strikes Back. It's the second one in there's his first one, which is, I think it's called The Dark Knight Returns. Yeah, it's The Dark Knight Returns. Then the second one is The Dark Knight Strikes Back. I love
that style, by the way.
Either way, so Frank Miller, it was made in like 2004, and he was writing it, and then halfway through writing it, 9/11 happened. I'm sorry, so it was written in 2001 is when he was writing it. So halfway through him writing it, 9/11 happens, and
changes paradigms indefinitely.
Completely changed what he was writing, and like so that story, and it does have an effect on the story. Like as I said, this story seems rushed, and I can understand why. If you're changing the idea of the story halfway through you writing it, that's gonna that's gonna give that feeling. The Dark Knight Strikes Back does have that feeling of weird and kind of jumbled.
You can sense the change.
And it's very profound, especially when you have people who are both writing and doing the art. Frank Miller also did both. He wrote and did the art.
It's
Sean
so much
Murphy.
an expression of that person.
Right. And I think there was something to be said, that whether good, whether bad, I think it's great and amazing, and I think that a lot of these kind of pieces like this are slices of people's hearts, or slices of people's souls. And
it's windows into their life and their experience. And I've often heard that personal experience actually isn't the best teacher. It's other people's experience that you can sort of have a cathartic understanding about without having to live that life. So we can draw from Punk Rock Jesus, Sean Murphy's account of it, like clearly his own inner turmoil with religion, and we can learn from it and have these novelty ideas of what if Christ came back and he was totally different from what we expected,
or what we want him to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this figure, this Messiah that everybody's been waiting for. What would that look like?
Yeah,
it's a very, very good telling of that story.
And I think, and I think it's, I just love it. I think it's great. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm totally glad you turned me on to it. Even like 2 years ago when I first bought it from Barnes & Noble, I think, and then eventually got around to finishing it today. So, yeah, I recommend it. This is definitely go pick it up.
So, I think that's all that can be really said for this. I think we've done it justice, with our, right now we're running at over an hour and a half. So I think that's doing it some pretty good justice.
Way to go, Punk Rock Jesus. Punk Rock Jesus.
Punk Rock Jesus. Pray to the Punk Rock Jesus.
Yeah, I'm glad that this idea is in my life now. Punk Rock Jesus. That's a lovely image. What would life be like without it? RJD.
That's
what would
really
Punk Rock
long.
Jesus do?
That's really long.
Yeah, folks, I want you to think about that tomorrow as you go to work, or if you're at work, if you're driving, or whatever.
Just think
what
about
would Punk Rock Jesus do?
Don't wait till tomorrow. Think about it today.
Think about it right now.
Carpe diem.
Seize the day, guys. All right. This has been Not So Super Podcast.
Well, let's
one thing I want to mention before we go is that we are supported by Amazon. We get a little bit of your purchase if you go through our Amazon portal. If you're watching this on YouTube's, down in the show notes, you can find the links to Punk Rock Jesus where you could buy it. Or you could just go through the portal and anything you're going to buy on Amazon anyway, we get a cut so we can keep making this podcast.
And the other thing to mention is please rate us on iTunes.
Yes.
Rate us on YouTube. Give us likes, subscribe.
Good or bad, whatever you feel, whatever you think we deserve.
Yeah, and if you can email us or if you can comment on one of those platforms, maybe we'll read it. Depends on how offensive it is. But maybe the more offensive. No, yeah.
The more likely we'll read it. I don't know.
The less likely I'll read it, most likely. Depending, the better it is, the more likely you have a chance of us reading it. Maybe you don't want us to read it, and that's fine too. But our email address is Brennan.
Just know that we can interact with you guys, and if you have any suggestions, like definitely let us know, and we would actually like to work that in as a segment, like maybe every third or fourth, fifth, whatever, we do suggestions. So throw us some suggestions. What were you getting at? Like my email?
Yeah. Well, Brennan, what's the email for the podcast?
Oh yeah. So folks, it's drivemidnight@gmail.com. Exactly the way it sounds is how it's spelled.
Great. And then that's so Punk Rock Jesus was this week's comic. I picked this one. So Brennan, what is the next comic we're gonna read?
The next one we're going to read is IRL, in real life, because it is a small enough graphic novel I believe you can read by the next podcast. And then, something by Craig Thompson after that, which is a little bit longer. So we'll keep that a mystery which one for now. But
it's Habibi. Yeah. We've talked about it in other ones. It's going to be Habibi.
All right, it's Habibi, guys.
Pick it up and start reading it now.
Start reading it for the love of God.
Because it's long.
Yeah, it's a long haul. 700 pages, maybe? Anyways, next one we're going to do is IRL, which is not 700 pages. It's in real life. I don't know the author's name right now, but we can put it in the show notes.
Great. Cool.
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
So then, next episode, it'll be in real life, and then after that, it'll be Habibi. So pick those guys up and get reading.
Read along.
Yeah. Do you got any final thoughts, Brennan?
Punk Rock Jesus. I'm glad that Sean Murphy brought this vision to us. What would life be like without Punk Rock Jesus? I'm also glad that you suggested it. Give it a read, guys.
All right, great.
And go out there and drive fast and live dangerously. I don't know. Cut that out. We're gonna cut all that. let me play that back.
Right.
Once more. Punk Rock Jesus.
All of that is staying in now.
No, it's not. It's not. All right. What? All right. What was the question?
The question.
Do you have any last thoughts?
Do you have any last thoughts? I'm leaving this all in because it's amazing.
No, don't do it. Yep. Eat lots of vegetables. I don't know. Play us out, Matt.
All right.
Good Lord, you better cut that.
For Not So Super Podcast.
It's almost 2 hours.
I've been Matt Curley, joined by my co-host
Brennan Kahn.
Stay not super, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.